try an experiment because I got a few slides here, and then we're going to watch a piece of the internet on the internet or YouTube by Ray Archuleta, and we'll see if we can make the transition. I don't know whether we'll succeed, but we'll try. What I want to do is talk a little bit of the causes and solutions to grazing, and get you so when you look at a picture of land, your mind starts saying, did man cause this, or is this natural? Because most of the deserts of the world are caused by man. The Sahara Desert was a grassland before man came out of Africa. Their grazing came up, their moving grazing stuff, so that became grassland. There are elephant tusks in Iraq that they found and stuff, so the world over, grazing has been done wrong and done right, depending on where you were. So I want to talk about that and have you realize that in the solutions to grazing we've heard forever on that. All the environmentalists are talking about how bad the cows are, and without cattle you will never solve desertification. And I don't think you'll ever solve the global warming and stuff because we've done so much to the soil. So we follow the soil health principles. Now, let's see if we can get to the next slide. I thought I'd start with the soil health principles. As many of you know, when I start talking, I eventually get to them, but I thought I'd just start this time because they're so important to desertification. And these 5 principles, if you hear people talk about, the real experts at it, they'll add a 6th one, which is a human element, which says if somebody's totally opposed to this, then you have to work around it. But these are the 5 that affect the soil. Otherwise, how you get the humans involved. But armoring the soil means you don't ever leave it bare. You put as much litter on it as you can get on it. And in a, say a 6-inch precip zone or a 4-inch precip zone, you're not going to have as much as you will have, say, in a 16-inch precip zone. And by litter, you mean? Yeah, that's dead grass or anything on it that's not bare ground. So you want something to stop the raindrops when they hit it, to break up the raindrops, break up the sun so it's cooler. So you armor the surface, you limit disturbance. If you think about the way we farm, we plow it up, we do all sorts of stuff to get a good soil bed. That disturbance destroys the soil, and our soils have gone from maybe 8 or 9% organic matter down to 1 and below because of the way we farm. And I got some pictures to show in the grazing scheme what that does. But chemical and mechanical are both disturbances that the good people now are not doing. You build diversity. If you think about what it was like when the Buffalo War here, this is what this is all based on. Is we go back to what did this stuff evolve with over the last millions of years? How did it build? And you don't have monocultures in nature. Here you may get 10 or 15 species of plants. If you get down in where you get more moisture, say a 16-inch precip zone in eastern Wyoming into Nebraska, the Dakotas and stuff, you'll have 30, 50, 60, 100 species. They don't have monocultures. And we never had that until man came along. And then you keep living roots in the soil. When you think about it, we didn't kill everything before man showed up. We didn't plow it up and destroy everything. There were always living roots in the soil. So you try to do that, and you integrate animals. There was never anybody saying the buffalo shouldn't be here. They moved across. I've got a picture that shows a little bit what they look like. But there were always animals, whether it was the buffalo early with elk. Elk moved to the mountains in, I think, around 1800 or in the 1700s, just before white men came across the continent. But it's, you integrate animals, and this is where a lot of the environmentalists have trouble. You can't do soil health the way it should be done. to build the organic matter in the soil. If you do these 5, there are people doing organic matter built 0.5% per year, 0.5 percentage point per year. So if they start out at 1%, in a few years they're 2 or 3%. And they only do this, if you don't do all, if you do 3 or 4 of these, you can't build, you can not destroy the soil so much, but you can't build it. So, see if I can get, this is a picture, NPR had it on their thing, and I don't know anything about this area. It's in southern Nevada, California area. It's a national monument. And the question I wanted you to think about as you go through this is, was this originally grassland? Did man cause all this bare ground and stuff? I don't know, because I don't know the area. But the probability is it was a grassland, with animals coming through only occasionally. And we probably created that. And if we can watch the video I have, we'll show an area, an experimental station in southern New Mexico that shows what happens with man's interpretation of how you should do things. But this is a photo taken actually on our place, west of town, just across the river from Bessemer Bend. This was taken in August 24th of 1870. And one thing to note is, this is all grass here. This is the Platte River back here. These ridges, if you line things up, there's a tree right up there that's been hit by lightning, and you can tell it's all that's left is just the stake of the trunk of the tree. And was hit again in about 2000. Lightning hits twice if you wait long enough. So, but this is what it looked like in 1870. Now this is probably better. This is on the Oregon Trail. This is the Hayden expedition as they came through this area, and then I think they eventually went up to Yellowstone. They came through here first. In 1870, this has been overgrazed. Any brush in here had been taken for firewood in the 1840s and 50s. Because all those, 40,000 people coming through, they got to burn, they got to cook their dinner, cook their breakfast. So anything that was burnable was burned. So this was overgrazed probably, and then it bounced back. So this probably got more grass than it was normal, but this is closer to what it looked like. And this is when we took over the place in '56. Oh my. And I don't know if that's me or my older brother or what, but this is April, so nothing is greened up. But you can see just moving sand. But if you look at, here's a tree up there. And this picture, when I sit and look and line up the back here, should have been taken a couple 100 yards to the right. They would have lined up perfectly. And somewhere I've got a picture where it's lined up perfectly, but because a bunch of us went out there and lined it up with the Historical Society in 2020. We got out there. This is what it looked like. This is all caused by man. This was improper grazing. And the reason that we were able to buy the place was this was a sheep outfit. There's nothing left to eat. They were losing money. They had grazed everything off. And this is just where they grazed. We couldn't even graze anything for 3 years. And slowly we came back. This is in summer, it's closer to August. But as you can see, here's a tree. And the trees have, of course, grown up since 1870 and stuff. But the lining of the hill here, this is my brother Charlie. And but yeah, we have weeds. If you try to do this stuff, a lot of these are weeds. There's some sage coming in and stuff. But there's at least cover on the ground. And this wasn't, we didn't know enough to graze right here, but we weren't grazing as bad as it had been. And this is just another example of destroying things. This is a picture just north of Casper, bordering on the dump and going on the north side of that road that goes from the dump there. I don't forget what it's called. There's a lake over here that the Amoco refinery put all its effluent in for, well, 50s to early 2000s, I think. And so they stopped all the grazing. And what I was trying to show, this is after the best grass year we've probably ever had in Wyoming. But this used to be sagebrush and native grasses and all, and these tall grasses are Camelvilfa, I think. But there's a native sandgrass. And I can't see as well in this, but you can see, this just doesn't show what I wanted to. There's a huge amount of bare ground here. When I took the soil expert, the sagebrush expert out here about 2000, I still had a key to get in here. I don't have a key now, so this is just taking, see the fence there, just taking across the fence. But we could go out on the northern edge where they still had some grazing and see the border of this 2.5 section area that was fenced off in the 50s. All the sagebrush inside the fence had died because there was no grazing or anything. And all the native plants were dying. It looked like you could stop cheatgrass with just a woven wire fence. Because inside, where there wasn't grazing, the cheatgrass had taken over. Outside, it was just a small component of the grass. And it had said nothing about how the guy was grazing on this side, just that he was grazing. So I came away from all the stuff I've done is that the worst thing you can do to any land is not graze it. It destroys it more thoroughly than overgrazing does. But it's just improper grazing in this case. And I was trying to show all the bare patches of ground here that are there, and that didn't work very well, so I went out and took another picture. Here's a kangaroo rat hole, but you can see, when you really look at it, there's lots of bare ground here. There's very little, and there's another one. Just showing how much bare ground there is. There is some litter, but that grass is going up, and it's oxidizing on the stems, so none of the carbon goes into the soil. It's all going up in the air. And there are lots of exclosures in our area where they've put out a bunch of, Bates Hole was 65 and 66, where they built these exclosures that are maybe an acre in size or something, not very big. But they excluded the animals, and the objective in the 60s, the way we were in grazing, was they wanted to see how much damage grazing was doing. Now you look at them, the native grasses are dying, the soil is capped inside and dying, the sagebrush inside is dying. It's really impressive. And if you walk across these exclosures, as I have done a couple of times, it's impressive. What I've never realized that so much damage could be done in such a short space just by excluding the animals. But, it's all improper grazing. This is it. I'll see if we can put this up. How do I get to the internet?
We now pause for...
Anyway, this is, I'll put it up later. If you ever want to, these books are really fascinating. And okay, sure. How do I stop? Probably, you want to stop? Yeah, because you just, yeah. Okay, this is Ray Abshuleta is one of the really top people grazing soil people in the country. He comes from New Mexico State. You'll talk about that a little bit. This is, sort of looks like the way the buffalo were. These are cows grazing, and then they'll move, and I don't know where he took this picture from, but then they'll move on, but they're moving them every day in this picture. So this is how the buffalo used to look like. When you see any pictures of big herds of buffalo and stuff, they're just scattered groups of buffalo, but they cover the whole area eventually. And if you graze this concentrated enough, that's how things evolve. You can do anything you want. And the reason I'm picking this is that he shows some areas of down in what's that desert? Jericho Desert. But anyway, no, how do I start up again? I don't know if you can hear me or not. Probably not.
Hang on a second, let me try something. Hush. Just chill. That's as loud as I can get it.
Yeah, I just read it.
If you press CC, we can use subtitles.
CC?
Yeah, right above
That
sub.
box. That box right next to it.
There's more stuff here.
Just let him go, we're following.
That's what it looked like in the 1800s. The grassland. That's one of the problems I have in the
Go back here.
We gotta fix that.
Alright.
That'll have to do it probably once more. One of the things on that is if they can do it in the desert, and these guys started about 2015, and they didn't plant any grasses or anything, they just used cattle, and they are moving them every day. And they've got 600 head, and they're putting them in one group, small group, concentrating them, and putting them in. It's a very expensive thing to do with water. The fencing isn't as bad as the water, trying in a dry area like that, but they're in a 6-inch rainfall area. For 9 months of the year, they don't get any. It all comes in a fairly short time period, and the range is, 6 to 11 inches. We're a 12-inch rainfall here, but ours is scattered over the year. Theirs is concentrated, but if you can take a desert like that, they show those pictures, if you can take a desert and do that to it by just grazing right, they don't plant anything except for fence posts, and that you can change anything, but it gives you a different perspective on this. This next piece is just talking about the difference between, on farmland where he's making, this is an older video, I saw a video, he thinks he's making $2 million a year on 7,000 acres, better than he did before because he was using soil health principles. That really isn't the desert. But we have done with chemicals, we've done, I don't know whether I can get back to that piece and show you what they look like. Let's see. This is what I was talking about. This is how you do it with chemicals.
Oh, there, wow! Let me get that graphic.
All right. But see, you can do it with chemicals. They've done it with all the orchards. And in Florida, they have this disease called citrus greening. It's basically destroying the citrus crop. And I've read there's one person down there who's following the soil health principles. Instead of having bare ground underneath the trees, he's growing cover crop, grasses and other stuff, and then he's got sheep coming in and eating it. And the result is citrus greening is just a minor problem. But we've been taught, when I was in school a few years ago now, we were always taught that chemicals were the answer. And that's, there's a technological answer to everything. And he's got a quote in here later, I don't know whether I can find it, where he's talking about Einstein says, we're headed towards having a bunch of idiots because we'll always think the technical answer is. Einstein says it better than I do, but the basics of it was follow nature. And, there's examples here. If you don't do anything, I don't know how in that research station they had, they show the pictures and it just went downhill, and they kept reducing the animals in there, and they never did the grazing the way the buffalo did. They always thought they knew better, so they would reduce it. Well, we're overgrazing, and they just cut the animals back, and the soil just disappeared. If you take a land and virtually all the grazing, not grazing lands, but all the rangelands of the world, whether it be Africa or here, they have all gone downhill, but they all were originally, before man got involved, you always had the buffalo or, you know, zebras, whatever, in Africa, in the Serengeti, where they had those big migrations. They always were grazing animals, and what they do is they graze, and then because they ate everything, then they move off the land and let it recover. And in this country, the early journals, if you go back and read journals, you'll find where the pioneers coming across would hit where the buffalo had been, and they might go 3 days through where the buffalo had been. There was nothing for their animals to eat, and they would talk about how they got to get through these where the buffalo had been because there's nothing there. They got to feed their animals, and this was the way it was. It's how it evolved, because that was before man. You can't just have the animals sit there, because right now we have elk that are just sitting on the land and destroying areas because they're sitting there and they're not being moved around by wolves or anything. So you have to try to mimic it, and what this fellow Ray Archuleta says, and a bunch of others, they say, look at what the grazing was. And there was grazing buffalo all the way down into Georgia on this continent. When you talk about it, southern Georgia, there's a fellow, Will Harris, who's grazing down there. And he's sequestering carbon, and he's got carbon buildup too. And he's got all the scientific stuff on it. And what he found out was that for every pound of meat he sells in the store, he sequesters 3.5 pounds of carbon in it, which is an impressive amount if you think about producing meat. If cows are the problem, how come they can sequester grass like that? But even in Georgia, they had grazing. You know, they had fires and it would open things up, and Indians it would open things up. But a whole country, our whole country, probably Russia, I don't know anything about the Russian steppes and stuff, but I suspect, because the whole world's this way, the exception being Australia. They don't have any hoofed animals that are native to Australia. And the result is they have a real true desert down there. It's probably not man-caused for basically almost the whole continent. We just got the edges where there's some moisture. But there's some people down there with hoofed animals that are creating grasslands much better. But for the most part, they grazed the way Europeans, because they were Europeans that came in there with the livestock and removed the natives. But when you're grazing like that, what you want to do is concentrate the animals so that they grab everything. And some of the best grazers in this country don't have this kind of animals here. I don't know where he got this picture. That's a lot of animals in that herd, maybe 1,000 or 2. So it might be the Mormon ranch. But when you're raising the smaller numbers, you can move the animals 5 or 6 times a day. And there was a fellow in Nebraska who did that, named I think it was Chad Peterson. My memory serves me right. But he was moving cows 5 or 6 times a day, and he ended up sequestering carbon at the rate of a little better than 1 percentage point per year, just with grazing. He wasn't doing anything else, but he was concentrating in, quarter acre for 300 or 400 cows, and then moving them every day with fencing and stuff. And he had the fencing down to the early times, but that was just the way you graze. If you let it renew, and there's all sorts of ways to do this that are more similar than what our traditional way. Our traditional way of grazing, when I first started looking at grazing back in the 50s, when the dad was talking about what he was seeing, and we didn't see it right, and we could see it. And everybody at that point was saying, if you leave a blade of grass, you didn't do a good job of grazing. And that was the attitude. I can remember being on a range tour out of Du Bois, and when they were looking at mountain sheep range, bighorn sheep range, and the game and fish guy was saying, maybe we ought to bring in some cattle or something, not domestic sheep, because that wouldn't work, but cattle, because they were leaving grass on the ground. And Dr. Beadle from the University of Miami said, what's wrong with leaving some grass? That was when the thought process was starting to change to the way we were thinking, well, you do 50%. And before that, you just grazed, everything slow. And the university was teaching, probably until about 2000. All the universities were teaching that you come in and graze with your animals, and you do it lightly, and you do it whole season whole. You don't move pasture to pasture. And then Savory came along in the 80s and showed them that they were wrong. But if you ever want to do things, you have to have cattle, and you can't do this without. And one of the things that it's Alan Williams, one of these guys, Great Arch Leathers Partners, has done some studies on the meat that you have from grazing like this versus feedlot operation, where right now most of the cattle in the country, we raise them on grasslands here, and then they get to yearling age, or even as weaned calves, they go into feedlot. And he's measured the amount of nutrients, and there's a whole stack of various amino acids and other nutrients that are in beef. And the feedlot beef had about 50% on average. Some of it was 60, some of it was 40%. But on the average, it was 50-some% of stuff that was out, what they call grass-fed beef. And that applies across the whole board to everything, whether it be farmed fish or eggs or something. There's one piece, I don't know where I can find it. I ought to show that to you. That's on that subject. It's really. It's a fascinating piece. Real good. Okay. That doesn't show this well. The Gabe Brown one is got much more red in it. Oh. All the ads. It didn't do it as well as I wanted to. See some of the colors here. The colors didn't show up as well on the screen as they should. The Gabe Brown, where it's pastured poultry, is much, much darker yellow. Not
Yeah, it
as
shows.
pale.
Yeah, you can tell.
That's
Shows.
okay.
Sunset.
Yeah.
It doesn't, to me, from this angle, it doesn't look as good. But anyway, one of their, no, that's not what I want. One of the points they are making with this is that if you mimic nature, then your nutrients are cycling the way they're supposed to, and all the food you're eating will have it. If you look at at the vegetables we're eating now, for instance, they have 30% of the nutrients that we used to have in the 50s. All industrial farming has taken out the nutrients we have because we've been going for cheap. What we've done is reduce the cost, but there's a lot of thought in some of our diseases and stuff that we have some real problems with the nutrient quality of our food. But it's all from the industrial way we're doing it. It's more expensive to do beef this way. I think you can probably produce as much, but it's just flat. It's a more expensive way because it takes longer. If you put it in a feedlot, you feed it corn, it's not a natural thing. You kill some of the animals because you get acidosis in it, but it's, if you eat lots of sugars, you're going to gain a lot faster than if you will if you're just eating grasses. So it takes about 6 months less in a feedlot. But that speed makes it cheaper. And you can do, there's whole lots of economies of scale and stuff you can't do in a rangeland. But the cost is desertification and nutrients that we're losing. But when you hear people talk on the environmental side about cattle, and I'm a little prejudiced because I've seen what it does. But they're talking about you got to eat less meat, and what their real complaint is the feedlot. It's not it's the way we do it, not the cow, not the animal. And how do I get back to the other thing? So I wanted to talk.
I don't actually know how to do this, Stacey. I'm making it up as I go along.
Now, oh, that did that. I wonder how. Huh. Anyway, under the click to add title piece, which I don't know how to remove.
Go, Gracie, go.
Oh.
Yay, Garrison!
Someday I'm gonna have to. Oh, great, thank you.
Just stay there, Dickerson.
Thank you. Okay. If you want to know more about this subject, the Gabe Brown, his story is that he started out as a conventional farmer. He actually grew up in Bismarck itself and married a farmer's daughter. And in the 90s, he bought the place from his father-in-law, and they had 3 years of disaster. He got wiped out by hail by 3 years, and they hadn't been hit by hail. And his father-in-law, in 40 years of farming or something, and hit the hail once, and it didn't do that much damage. He got wiped out in 3 years of hail. So he had to do things. He didn't have the money to do a lot of this. And he learned how to do things. So his story is fascinating because the book he wrote is Dirt to Soil, but it's just he's got quite a few things on the internet where you can see just pieces of it. And he talks about the whole works. He's one of the founders of the real movement to soil health. Ray Archuleta, you just saw, he's got half a dozen videos that you can see on YouTube that are really fascinating. Rick Clark is the owner of Clark Land and Livestock, or Land and Cattle, I think he calls it. He has 7,000 acres in Indiana, and he went from conventional. Took him 15 years, but he went from conventional, now he's going to organic, but regenerative ag, which is different. Organic only says, if you're certified organic, is that if you don't put chemicals on the land, you don't do this, there's all a bunch of don'ts. The regenerative says you've got to regenerate the land, and you've got to increase your soil organic matter. And it's a different way of looking at it. For instance, you can have organic eggs or something, and the chickens are still crammed into a house. They don't get to go out and eat outside the way that Gabe Browns would do.